My name's Neil Gaiman. I'm a writer of things. And we're at the San Diego Comic Con. It's 2013. And we're going to talk about Sandman Overture. 25 years ago, Sandman #1 was published. It was in 1988, and somewhere in about November. And at the very beginning of Sandman #1, the Dream King himself, Morpheus, the Sandman, is captured by a black magic organization in a basement in an English manor house and is kept there for 70 years. And he escapes, he takes his revenge on his captors, and the story begins. What we never found out was why it was so easy for them to capture him, why he was exhausted beyond endurance, why where he'd come from. We learned during the course of Sandman that he'd come from a galaxy far away, he'd been traveling, he was dressed for war, he was exhausted, but we don't know anything about what, why, who, or how. There are so many things we never found out, and I knew them all, but I never got to tell anybody in the story. So now, 25 years later, I'm getting to tell that story. And it's called Overture, because it begins before Preludes and Nocturnes. And it's very, very strange. The anniversary was a huge part of why I wanted to come back and do another Sandman story. 25 years is huge. 25 years is big. 25 years in the life of a comic. The idea, okay, I grew up reading comics. I was a kid. Probably the high point for me of reading comics would have been 74, 73, 74, 75. The idea back then that a comic that would have started being published in the late 1940s and finished in the mid-50s would still be relevant and exciting would have been almost unthinkable. But things have changed now. And I guess Sandman was one of the things that actually changed them. We created new readers. We didn't have those readers before. One of the things that happened when Sandman started coming out was the very first signings I did for Sandman were all male. There weren't any women in the signing lines. There were just guys, because guys read comics. And then, as the months went on, every signing I'd go to, there'd be a couple more women in the line. You know, you'd notice them. They were like rare and precious flowers. You hadn't seen them in signing lines before. And then I came out to San Diego, to the comic convention, in 1989. And I remember we were up to about Sandman 7 at that point. And even then, people started coming over to me and saying, "Hey, you write Sandman. I gotta thank you, you're bringing women into my shop." Demographics were changing. At the time, we started getting adults reading comics. I remember reading an article in a magazine in the UK back then that said there can be no comics for adults because adults don't read comics. And of course, they were wrong. Adults do read comics. We may call them graphic novels sometimes just to, confuse our trail. But we know what we're reading. And the idea was just, when I was starting out as a writer, I decided that comics were a medium. They were a medium like any other medium. Nobody was saying you could only do television for children. Nobody was saying you could only do plays for children, or you could only do poems for children, or you could only do movies for children. And it seemed to me that comics, it was as if you had as if they'd started doing movies and somebody had said, this is a great medium for 13-year-old boys. We will aim all movies forever at 13-year-old boys. And Citizen Kane would never have happened. So many films would never have happened. So for me, Sandman was telling the kind of story that I wanted to tell. So in terms of why the time is right to come back and do another Sandman story, there's an awful lot of people who weren't expecting it, who are very, very happy. And I get to tell my story. And I get to work with J.H. Williams, who came running up to me at a outside, I think, the Omni Hotel here in San Diego about a decade ago, and just said, I have to tell you, I'm J.H. Williams, I draw Promethea. I said, I'm a huge fan of yours. He said, I love your work. I want to work with you. Anything you want to do, I want to do it. And I loved Promethea, and I just thought, you know, we should do this. So when the idea of doing another Sandman book came along, I had this short list that was a really short list because it had J.H. Williams' name on it. And what would have happened if he'd said, no, I'm not sure? We would have had to draw up another short list, I guess, but he said yes.
I couldn't pass up Overture because I've always wanted to work with Neil. And Sandman was a series that I highly respected. I grew up a little bit reading some of it, and I remember reading a particular issue of that series and knew at that point I was reading something I hadn't really seen before. And when the opportunity came to contribute to that story in a small way, I had to do it. I've been feeling the pressure significantly about the butterflies. And primarily because I know it's such a highly honored series, and I want to be able to feel like I'm bringing justice to what Neil writes, and yet somehow retain myself in that, and hopefully try to do something from a visual level that wasn't done before with the series. Some of my favorite things I've seen so far in the story is when I first read the first 5 pages of issue 1, Neil had sent them to me before I had read anything else in the script. He's just sent that to me, and he was very nervous about it, why I don't know. And he's like, it wasn't even formatted to, or anything. He's like, I want to know what you think. And it's one of the coolest opening sequences I've ever seen for a series. It's really unique and kind of a little bit abstract in thinking in some ways. As an example of the reaction we might get from it is when I showed some of the black and white artwork at my spotlight panel yesterday. That particular sequence is what we showed, and the audience kind of goes like that and tilted their head because they weren't sure what they were seeing, and that I thought was fantastic.
I think my favorite part of the book so far, my favorite part is actually the process. My favorite part is the point where J.H. Williams sends me a page and my jaw drops and I go, I have to up my game. I have to get better. This is better than the thing that I thought when I had it in my head. Oh, lore, now people are just going to be looking at the artwork. I have to make the story stronger. So that is actually my favorite part of the entire thing. And the truth is, beyond that, I don't really want to spell anything. I like the idea. It's very hard to keep secrets these days. The internet is out there. There is an awful lot of overload. There's a lot of information. So keeping things secret is hard enough. I will tell you one thing that I loved in the first book, because I asked J.H. Williams to do something that I actually thought when I wrote it was probably impossible. But I thought, artists, you should always ask them to do something impossible somewhere in the first few pages, and just to teach them humility, frankly. Show them who's boss. So I asked him to do me a flower that was Dream, a flower that was Morpheus, a flower that was the Sandman. And I explained what it would look like. I said, with the petals, it would have white petals, and it would have leaves that would somehow subtly remind you of a cloak. And there wouldn't actually be a face in the leaves of any kind, but somehow the configuration of the petals would remind you of how Morpheus looks. And I thought, there you go. Most of the artists I know who I'd asked to do this would just send me back a note telling me exactly what I could do with my script and how they were going to go back and just do nothing but Batwoman now. And J.H. Williams sent me a flower that was Dream.
Thanks for following what we do and keeping us energized and excited. Seeing your enthusiasm just makes for us to want to do what we do even more.
Thank you for watching. Sandman Overture is going to start in October. It'll come out bi-monthly because this is the 25th anniversary of Sandman, and there are 6 comics, so we're going to spread them over the year. I really hope you like them. It's a story I wanted to tell forever. I'm absolutely terrified because when I started writing Sandman, nobody cared. Nobody was looking over my shoulder. It didn't matter to anybody but me. And now we have tens, perhaps hundreds of millions of people who care. And that's absolutely nerve-wracking, absolutely terrifying, and I hope I can live up to whatever it is that you want to read. Thank you.